Welcome to a new kind of truth. This podcast will broadcast a new gospel that will feel like church, where the pews are filled with the hues of the human condition. Folks searching for something, because we all going through a similar kind of something. All of us looking for a message, so no need to sit in the back. Come to the front, learn a lesson, get a blessing. You probably came to be entertained or hear the choir sing, but you about to feel the thoughts of a purpose-driven woman. No sugarcoating, all truth, straight, no chaser. Here to get down to the heart of the matter, so be prepared to peel back the layers. Pour your wine, open up your mind, and let's unwind to the rantings of Danny.
All right. So I let you guys know what I'm doing today is a little bit different. Again, I'm doing a Facebook Live at the same time that I'm recording for the podcast, and this is going to be the fourth episode in a series on racism in America. And what's been so interesting about this journey has been all the different sides to this issue and how it just keeps expanding. I originally thought it would be a 5-part series. Now it's looking like it's going to be a 7-part series. If you have not subscribed to the podcast, you can do that on iTunes, on YouTube, on Spreaker, on SoundCloud, and the Facebook page, The Rantings of Danny. I want to have this conversation alone. I keep saying that. You can email me at therantingsofdanny.com. So having said that, I want to take just a second and introduce my guest to you. She is a time friend, and maybe since high school, I want to say. And but we lost touch for a really long time, and then reconnected recently. And she was on the Facebook Live when I just did episode 3. And during that conversation, she was one of the few people who spoke up. And here's what I find incredible about the last episode. So the last episode of the podcast was dealt with the fact that we have 8 to 17 white supremacists, openly white supremacist supporters who are running for office. And in that conversation, we just started to, talk about how are we A-OK with this, and B, supposed to say or think or do as a person of color in this country. What am I supposed to be able to say? What am I supposed to be able to do? How can I say it? And how do other people feel about it? And what I found interesting was over 1,100 people have watched that episode, and only like 3 people spoke up during the recording, which was just crazy to me that only 3 people had something to say. And Jennifer was one of those. So I'm introducing you guys to Jennifer. Like I said, she is a friend of mine. And first I have to say thank you for being willing to do this, because it can be a little bit scary. This is a conversation, and I don't know that everybody would be willing to do it, much less do it on a live. So thanks, and I appreciate you doing so.
You're welcome.
Hey, Natty. Okay, so I just want to kind of get into this. So during the last episode, what we were talking about was, just what's okay, what's not okay, how do we feel about things? And you said something that I found really intriguing. You said you heard racist comments from your grandfather all the time growing up. But in the course of growing up for you, you always, when you saw people of color, people who looked different than you, you saw a person with a soul. You saw somebody, with a heart. Sometimes there were people that you respected and people you loved. And so you didn't quite form. These were your exact words. You said, I could not see people through his lens. And I found that to be really, really. So I'm going to give you just a second and kind of expound upon that and share with me, what are the things that you heard being said? What were you told? What were you taught to look for and expect? That sort of thing.
Well, the N word, which I won't say, but that was a word I heard a lot. And other concepts like lazy, didn't want to work, mean, crime. I mean, those were things that you just associated. Violence. Those were things that you associated with people who were African American. That was what. And so when you saw African American people, your automatic reaction would be to fear them.
Gotcha.
which is what I learned from that part of my family from a very young age. Now, my mom, an amazing woman, luckily I had that influence too, because she had strong bonds with African American women. And these women in particular were highly educated women, well-spoken women, and they worked together. And so I had those influences and got to be in those women's homes with their families. And so I knew that those words weren't, I knew that the stories that I heard couldn't possibly be true of every single African American person on earth, just like people who would say, oh, you're from East Tennessee, you're redneck, or just like I knew that every single person where I'm from doesn't mean I'm whatever they say about us, you know. So I learned from a young age also that you can't categorize people by color of skin, by religion, you just can't. Everybody's a different person. You just can't do it that way.
So your mom, a little bit about kind of sort of like my mom in terms of the fact that despite where they were raised or how they were brought up or maybe the things that they were taught to see and expect from people of color, that they found a way to connect with people on a different level and see them as people. Now, here are the things that I love to kind of pick your brain about. How's family time? Because like, you know, in my house, growing up with my white mom, and we had a variety of, I mean, like there was every shade you can imagine in my growing up. What's it like your dinner table where, you know, you hear your dad say nigger this or whatever that, you know, and associate all of those negative characteristics with them, and for you and your mom to hear believe different? What was the interaction like in your family? Were there disagreements, arguments? What was that like?
Now, my dad didn't say those things, oddly enough. He just didn't say anything. He didn't.
Got it.
Now, he had been in the military and had made friends also. And I don't think he ever blatantly disagreed with his dad about any of it. I don't know. We just kind of kept quiet about it. My mom was very quiet about her. She wasn't a in your face, I'm friends with African American people kind of person. She any more than she was just an advocate of people, period. Low income people. If she saw a need, she filled a need. That's just who she was. And she wasn't loud about any of it. She just did it. I loved that about her. But at my grandparents' house, I mean, we just sat silently. Nobody talked about it. You just listened to it and you just let it happen, because who would argue with him? You know, he's loud. That's how he grew up. But nobody argued with him. You know, it just kind of trickled down.
So looking back at it now, do you feel like maybe things would have been different if somebody had said something? If somebody had.
Yeah.
So you said something interesting on the live as well the other night. And you said, you know, when you look at everything that's happening right now in the country and the way that people think and the way that people believe and, you know, the things that are being said and done, that you feel shame. Can you share with us what you mean when you say you feel shame? Shame about what exactly? And kind of put something to that.
A little bit of shame because a little bit of that stuff's still in my head. There's still a little bit of when I see okay, I'll just use Dollywood on this past weekend. There's an African American man standing there dribbling a basketball, half watching his kids, and a little bit of that voice is still in the back of my head thinking, and it's terrible. You know what I mean? But there's still a little bit of in the back of my head, a little voice when I see somebody that looks like a big old redneck that does the same thing. You know, there's still little voices in the back of my head that judge people all the time. And it's not just a racist thing, it's a judge thing. And that comes more from my religious. So we'll talk religion one day, I'm sure. We'll leave that off today. But yeah.
Religion is the next part, because what I'm finding in this journey and in having these conversations is, as much as we would like to think that racism, religion, politics, that they're all separate issues, feminism, as much as we would like to believe that they're separate, they all kind of blend together because they're part of a core belief system. And so the very next thing that we'll tackle after I finish this series on racism is, in fact, religion, and the way that it's used. And I think, you know, I can identify with that, both of us being from the same hometown in Northeast Tennessee. And in the South, religion and racism go hand in hand. Religion and judgment, where we're from, go hand in hand. So now let me ask you this. When you say that sometimes that little voice in the back of your head, still when you see someone who's a person of color, what are some of the things that little voice says?
Still says
what
lazy.
Still
says lazy. Still says, you know, still says crime. All those things he said. There's still that little bit of fear. Even though I chose not to look through the lens, there's still that little voice in the back of my head that has those words there. And I wish it would, part of me wishes it would go away. But I mean, when you've heard that stuff all growing up, and it's just, you know.
It's just part of what you're taught. That stuff never kind of goes away. And it just lingers there. And so because it's there, you still feel somewhat guilty or shameful that exist.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Does it make a difference? Do you think that your mom was able to have friends who were people of color and that was your exposure? Had your mom not had those friends, what do you think your perspective would have been about people of color?
Probably the same thing. All those words would be huge for me now. Had she not had those particular friends, because they were women who really strongly influenced me in my life. I mean, oh my gosh, if I had taken, I'm trying not to use names, but gosh, I can think of one in particular who was a boss of mine for a while. And she gave me such wise advice. And I mean, she was, and their household had such a culture that was different than mine, which every household I believe does. But like, I remember we had to wash our hands so much when we were at her house. They were so clean. And I always thought that African American people were dirty, because that's one of the words, you know, that we were taught, which is horrible. You know, that's a word that we were taught, that you were dirty and you're frozen.
Yeah, it's okay. You were for a minute too. I think it does it, and then it will come undone.
Okay.
Still going, so I'm still okay at that point.
So,
with that.
But I learned going into their house, like I would spend the night with her and her daughter, and I thought, well, they're way cleaner than we are. I mean, I've never washed my hands so much in my life. So that wasn't true. So just hanging out in those homes and being with those people taught me that a lot of things that I was taught weren't true.
So when I always say, so this is one of my core beliefs, is that we have to start to have these conversations, and we have to expound that circle of influence. So, you know, if I never sit down and have a conversation with a Southern redneck, and they never get to the opportunity to see a person of color as a human being, the way they act, then we don't stand a chance to bridge the gap, because without being able to engage someone and see someone as an actual human being and as a person, you lose the ability to I saw you have your screen. Okay, so now let me ask you this. Where in your life do you think that you've been able to see white privilege work for you? That you feel like it would not have been the same had you been a person of color? anywhere?
That was one I really couldn't answer, other than just around here, particularly when you go to a store or something. There are parts of town when you go in a store, if you're a Black person, everybody kind of turns their head and looks. Just parts of town. Not so much on the Virginia side, but on the Tennessee side, over here in the part that I live in. But really not so much.
That in 2018 it's still that way. So like, you know, it's insane. Like when I go home, I'm very, very aware when I hit on the other side of the North Carolina mountain and I start to come down into Irwin and then Elizabethton, like Johnson City, I'm not as like on pins and needles, because I know it's a little bit more diverse. The university is there. So there's like just a different what. But the further northeast I go,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, holy crap, it gets to be a little bit frightening. And I think here's one thing that is, I don't know that you have the same experience driving around town that I do. So if I'm back home and I'm driving around, I'm careful. I'm mindful, because if I get pulled over, it's a completely different experience. I know that for me, growing up where we grew up, I think it almost contributed a little bit of my PTSD, is because at home doesn't mean safe for me. Police don't mean safe for me. And what's your relationship, do you think, with law enforcement and authority? Do you have that same feeling, or what's your take on it?
I never even thought of that. See, to me, that means safety and protection and everything good. Never thought of it.
Now, I'm going to ask you this because I can't, because we're friends.
Yeah.
You feel careful every time that you go to describe someone who's a person of color. You've been real careful to say African American every single time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is the voice not to say Black or not to say anything else?
I'm being real careful because I feel like I gotta be.
Share with me why you feel like you've got to be careful.
Because I don't want to offend anybody.
And they don't know you, and I do. And I know that you would never mean to offend. Do you think that that's a struggle too for white people who want to be a part of this conversation?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what's the fear? Is it just that you don't want to offend anybody? Is it a fear that you don't want someone to think that's not true? What are all those fears?
Okay. Well, here's what us pinkish whitish folks talk about when y'all ain't around, or maybe just me and my pinkish whitish friends, but you all can call each other that N-word, but if we say it, oh, holy snarkle, it's like, it's a horrible word, but y'all call each other that all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would never call you that because It would be taken offensively, but you all say, oh, my this, and oh, my. So I guess I don't get it, but I would never, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a big fear. And then there for a while, African American was the right thing to say. So I just don't know. You're not Black, you're tannish.
I am.
You're brownish.
Part of, and there's a couple of different thoughts about using the word nigger. There's a couple of different thoughts about it. And there are some Black folk who are adamantly against it, that we shouldn't say it, we shouldn't call each other that because it's demeaning, it's devaluing, and all of that. There's another group of people who are of the mindset that by using it, we have taken the power of that word away from whites, away from how it was originally intended. So, the thought process is, there's two sides to that coin, and it just depends upon who you are as to what you believe and what you're thinking about it, and do you use it, do you not use it? So I get that piece of it. Now, the reason why we, white folks, it might not be a good thing for y'all to say, is real simple. There's still lingering effects of that word, why it was chosen, how it was used, and its evolution to what we see existing now in this day and time. I think there's a difference. white people don't have nicknames for each other. Like, hey, what's up, cracker? Like, y'all don't do that. Y'all don't. But I think it's because you've never had names given to you based on your skin color by each other. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit different. So I guess, let me ask you this. Knowing, you know, grandfather had the views that he had and that he was very adamant. And even though your mom had friends, so it's kind of like what we say is race via silence. You know, if you're not actively using your voice to combat it, it's complicit. You're complicit in its practice, you know, and that's how it feels for us. Like we want. I said this the other day. There's a group now on Facebook called White Nonsense Roundup, and it was created by white women, and they literally, there's a group of them now. And if you have someone who is a racist on your timeline or on your feed, or a troll who's, you know, spitting that are problematic or racist in general, you can literally tag them, and they come and round up their own kind and kind of say things on your behalf. Because I think when people hear someone who looks like, who was raised like them, it's easier to digest, and it's easier for them to maybe kind of say, oh, well, maybe they have a point. My question is, do you think there's validity in that?
Oh,
B,
yeah.
do you
Sorry.
benefit? No, that's cool. And do you think there's benefit to it? And C, how do you feel like you know, the conversations that you and I have had, how would you be able to implement that in your own life? And would it be something that you would even be comfortable with doing?
Tell me A again.
A was, do you feel like there's benefit?
Yes, I do. B.
And B, I don't even know what order I said them in now, but D, okay, so you benefit to it, but B, what do you think? I mean, like, so seriously, so how do we take this conversation and, how do we take this conversation, and how would you feel comfortable, or would you feel comfortable in your own community, in your own household, being able to have this conversation?
Well, part of it I'm doing right now. I'm looking at all the people that are watching this video right now on my Facebook, and I'm a little freaking out a little bit because it's not something I've ever talked about before. So now I'm talking.
Yeah. So I'll give you guys who know me a little bit of background. Jennifer and I are from the same small town in Tennessee, and we met in high school. I'll let her share with you how we met in just in a minute. But when she was on my live the other day, she's also in my wellness group. I have a wellness group that I coach. She's in the group, and after the conversation, she said to me that she felt shamed and she felt a little guilty, and that she just couldn't see Black people and people of color through the same lens that her grandfather saw. I asked her if she would be willing, to get on this live with me. Well, at first, after she did the interview, and she said yes, and we were just going to do it in private. And then I said, well, don't feel any pressure, but how would you feel about doing a live with me? And we would record it for the podcast as well. And she said, everybody would see me. And yeah, you can say no. And she said, no, that's okay. I want to learn. I want to do this. I want to be part of the conversation. And then when we started to do this, like literally right before I went live, I said, so wait a minute. Since I'm on, is it going to show up on my Facebook too? And I said, yeah. I said, now listen, you can back out right now. You can back out right now. I'll shut this down. We'll get on Zoom and we'll do it in private. I said, no, it's going to be okay. I want to do this. And so here's what I would say, first of all, is I appreciate your willingness to put your time, because that's what you're doing. I know where we're from, and I know what people may say about you. I know what people may say to you. I know what ramifications could be. So this is something that I really want to say thank you. You don't have to be here. You don't have to be part of the conversation, and you are. So I sincerely appreciate that because I know how much courage it took for you to be willing to do it. So, and for being honest about it, you know what I mean? I'll let you share with folks how we met and why you wanted to do this, and then I'll open it up if anybody has any questions before we wrap it up. So you can share with them how you met, what life has been like, and then.
Sorry, my battery's dying on my phone. I'm really nervous it's going to die, but if it does, it'll just die. I had a really bad experience at East High School. So I switched schools on my junior year. I went to Tennessee High. I'm hearing some feedback. Sorry. And so I went to Tennessee High my junior year, and I didn't know anybody there. And I had some church friends that went there, and they were gonna meet me at the front of the school or something. Anyway, we got mixed up. I didn't know where they were, and so I was going in this huge school, never been in, didn't know where anything was. And I walk in, and there's Danny. At the time, I knew her as Tara. And I walked in, and there's Tara, a black girl, and she just bebops up and introduces herself and starts showing me around. And she was just very kind to me, and kind of took me under her wing and showed me around, and it was just I was always very grateful that she was there and kind of took me under her wing and kind of took care of me in high school, because I left a school for bullying. Somebody bullied me so much so that I just didn't want to go back. And so for Tara to be the one to come in and take me under her wing and kind of help me out at the new school was really cool.
You know what's so crazy about that is I don't remember that day. I don't remember befriending you. I remember all the friendship we had after that. But that initial day, I don't remember. It's been a beautiful thing. I'm really grateful for the friendship. What made you say yes to having this conversation?
Why did I say yes?
Why'd you say yes?
Because I needed to.
What does that mean?
Because I've spent so much of my life just like I don't watch the news anymore. I don't pay attention to politics. I don't pay attention to what goes on in the world. And why do I stick my head in? It's time to stop doing that. I need to pay attention to what's going on in the world around me. And when you started reading off all those things, I thought, I don't even know what's going on in the world. That's pretty sad.
So for us, what this was about is to understand a couple of things. Racism is definitely something that's passed down from generation to generation. It's not something we're born with. It's also something that you can choose not to take on. And the most powerful thing to combat racism is the experience of one person to another, one human being to another, to be able to see each other, laugh together, get to know who we are as people. Jennifer was raised believing that blacks and people of color were lazy, were violent, were criminals, were dirty, all of those things. And yet, because she had the opportunity to know people of color as real human beings, spend time with them in their own homes and in their own environments, she was able to see something completely different. And here's the takeaway, though. Here's the takeaway. The voices are still back there. And I think that that's one thing that we have to own as people. In this effort, have these conversations, to be able to see each other, connect with each other. It's not like somehow we're going to twinkle our nose and every negative thing we've ever thought or been taught about each other is going to somehow go away. We're human beings, just not realistic, right? But what we have to do is get to the place where when we hear it, go, that's not the case, and I know better than that. I'm not 3 years old and 4 years old, and what my granddaddy said does not be law, right? And we get to be brave enough to have this conversation around other people and around the world, because this is the only way it changes. This is the only way it changes, is to have these types of conversations. So I'm going to open it up to see if anybody has any additional questions for Jennifer or for myself before I wrap it up. Ask, guys. We're both very open to the conversation. So ask away if there's anything that you would like. I'll just kind of wait a second and see if anything pops along here. Jen, is there anything else while we're waiting on questions or comments? Is there anything else that you want to share that you've been thinking about, since I asked you to do this, or even before that?
Well, when you asked me why I did it, now that I'm married into such a biracial family, now my husband's family has his sister's married to a man from Honduras and has children that are Mexican from a previous marriage. I mean, we have families that are biracial, Black married to white with biracial children, and there's other family members who totally disagree with the biracial joining still, not in that family, but in my side of the family, that say, oh, she just doesn't agree with what that does to those children. And I've actually spoken and said, what do you mean what it does to them? I don't understand your thinking. I mean, what it does to them. They're just born, they're children, they play. I mean, I don't even understand the concept
What it does to them? Have they expounded upon that? She
said she thought that it was difficult for children growing up with two different races of parents to explain to people why they have one parent one color and another parent another color, and why their skin is not the same color.
Believe it or not, that's something I've never had to explain. I've never had to explain why my mom was white and my dad is Black. That's not been a conversation I've had to have. But the whole not mixing of races thing is deeply rooted in the South. So I totally get that people are still of that mindset, that you just don't mix, and the idea that people still feel that way is just crazy. I know that it's there and I know that it exists, but to me, it's really sad that we're in 2018 and that still happens to be the mindset that some folks have.
Well, and I told her,
all right,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think I have German, and I mean, I'm not the skin is the same color, but there are different, there's all different manner of places that I came from if you start looking way back.
There's nobody that's just one thing. Everybody's got a little bit of something else in them.
Right.
And you're right, Jim. I don't think that we should have to explain, and that's the whole point of this conversation, is for us to start to really understand what this conversation is really about, be able to have it from a place of respect and wanting to really understand each other. Like, no judgment, no getting angry. Let me tell you something, guys. All this anger does nobody any good. I can't be angry at the things her granddaddy taught her, because that's just what he said at that time, and that's what he learned and what's been passed down. I can't be angry about those sorts of things. Anger does nothing, right? If we don't fuel things, if we don't find a way to connect and be able to marry the idea of respect, understanding, empathy, consideration, love, kindness, peace, and accountability, equity, justice, all of those things go hand in hand together. They go hand in hand. And my whole thing is, I can want both. And I do want both. I want justice, equity, and accountability. I would group those three together. And I also want forgiveness, healing, and love over here that I would group together. And I want them to commingle. So if you want to be a part of this conversation, inbox me, email me, Danny@therantingsofdanny.com. If you have not checked out all the other episodes, there are 3 other episodes of the podcast available. It's on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Spreaker. Make sure that you subscribe. There's going to be 2 more after this. I will be interviewing my mom. My parents were married in 1964, 3 years before the Loving case happened. And so I'm going to talk to my mom what that was like for her way back in the early 60s. And after that as well. So I invite you to participate. Thank you all for listening and joining in. Jennifer, I sincerely do appreciate your willingness to be so open, honest about the experience. And if you guys will hold tight, I'm going to wrap up the podcast portion and then we'll finish up on Facebook. So I appreciate you guys. Be amazing, be light, be love.